I hope you strapped in for the long haul, because if we go all the way through the book of Matthew, well, I could still be going through it when Jesus returns. It's the combination of how slow I go and how many events and what's the word? The narrative. It's just amazing. And I, I'm every time I think, oh, like today, we're coming up on a a story, a moment in Jesus' life that at first I thought this got to be just about my favorite, and then I remember, oh, well, that was my favorite, and that's my. I don't know how I love them all. Duh. Okay, we're in Matthew chapter 9 and verse 18. He's in Capernaum, and that's a town he moves in and out of a lot through the gospel narrative. And well, verse 18, while he was saying this, I mean, remember, he was talking about don't put a new patch on an old garment, and don't put new wine in old wineskins. And in verse 18, while he was saying this, a ruler came and knelt before him and said, my daughter has just died, but come and put your hand on her and she will live. Jesus got up and went with him, and so did his disciples. I don't know, as a dad of 3 daughters, I can't afford to put myself in this ruler's position. It's too heartbreaking. And yet there is this aspect of the daughter had died, and yet Jesus was there. Okay, so there was this hope. Okay. Jesus doesn't hem or haw. He doesn't offer any conditions. He just gets up and goes with the guy. Verse 20, just then a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak. She said to herself, if I only touch his cloak, I will be healed. Some people would say, well, yeah, people were superstitious. I'm looking at that and going, that's incredible faith. After 12 years, it's kind of indiscreet, but a lot of Bible scholars think this was some kind of menstrual bleeding for 12 years. As Gentile Americans, in 2024, we can't relate to all of the trouble and distress that those 12 years would have included. She was breaking Hebrew law by getting into a crowd. She wasn't supposed to do that. When you're bleeding, you don't do that. And her faith said, oh, if I don't even need to get his attention, all I want to do is touch the hem of his garment. In other words, just touch his clothes. I remember when I was a kid, and then as a younger adult, there were televangelists who, for a price, any significant donation to this ministry for God, you got a prayer cloth that he had prayed over and was supposed to have this intrinsic spiritual power. That is not what this is about. And I'm not saying this against the Holy Spirit. I'm just saying it against those guys. That's not, first of all, none of those guys are Jesus. Secondly, none of them were Paul. Third, none of them were Peter. Okay, hobby horse, get off. Story goes on in verse 22. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said. Your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed from that moment. I don't know if you can imagine. It's hard for me to imagine. She knew. I'm sure there were physical signals, and yet in her mind and in her heart, her emotions and intellect, she knew she was healed. That's like being released from prison after 12 years. Jesus didn't rebuke her. He didn't say, you at least wait your turn. None of that. Now, in other Gospels, the narrative is that Jesus stopped as he was walking. He said, whoa, 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 who touched me? I felt power leave me. Of course, the disciples are going, Jesus, look around. Who touched you? Come on. For whatever reason, Matthew doesn't record it that way. He just says, Jesus turned and saw her. And what I get from that is he knew who that was. And I think in the other gospel accounts, the reason Jesus asked that question, who touched me, was to give that person a chance to acknowledge and to say it was me. But I don't think he was asking because he didn't know. Okay. Take heart, daughter. Now, that was a very common way of addressing, as a Jewish man, addressing a Jewish woman. She was a daughter of, whose daughter? We don't know her dad, but we do know she was a daughter of Abraham. Okay. Then, I don't know, there's so many ways it could have happened. One is he could have just stopped it was like this mob, this crowd moving along at Jesus' pace. Boom, it stops. And Jesus addresses the woman, and then it moves on. Or what if Jesus just kept walking and, I don't know. At any rate, they went on to the ruler's house in verse 23. When Jesus entered the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the noisy crowd, there was traditionally in a Jewish home where a death had occurred, mourners were hired. And then friends and family along with them went through a ritual of mourning. And one of the rituals was flute players who would play a morose, sad tune, melody, as though to announce to the community, death has come to this family. Well, Jesus saw and heard this, and in verse 24 he said, go away. The girl's not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. I don't think this was a humorous, oh, you're so cute. No, I think this is, what idiot are you? After the crowd had been put outside, they didn't go on their own. He went in, took the girl by the hand, and she got up. Luke's record of this is my favorite record of this event, where Jesus takes her hand and says, little girl, get up. Talitha Kum, and she does. News of this spread through all that region. You think? If I had been, and Luke identifies this leader. He was a leader of the synagogue and had a name, Jairus. If I had been Jairus, Jesus had healed my daughter. Holy cow. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. At first, I would be just overwhelmed. I wouldn't have been frozen, but I would have gathered that little girl up in my arms and her mom with me, and I would wanted that to just be frozen in time. Luke again, he said once Jesus raised her from the sleep of death, he said, give her something to eat. I don't think we sometimes paint the picture of Jesus as practical as he was. I mean, come on, guys, give her something to eat, okay? She needs some food. And second in that is, here's what you do with yourself right now. Well, word of this spread like wildfire, because I think even if it hadn't been Jairus and his wife who had just become evangelists for the goodness and the power of Jesus, when the community in Capernaum saw that little girl step out of the doorway of Jairus's house, I think there would have been a collective gasp. See, don't forget, there was this crowd that had followed Jesus. Now, they didn't go in the house with him, but I don't think they dispersed when Jesus went in. Word got out. Many times when Jesus performed a miracle, he kind of said, don't tell anybody about this. Well, I won't call it wasted words, but I will say, really nobody was able to pull that off. Neither was Jairus and his wife. What if you'd been the little girl? What if you had been the one that Jesus raised from the dead? What would you, we don't know, it's not addressed. So we can use our sanctified imagination. And then, I don't want to reach too far on this, but really, aren't all of us her? Didn't Jesus raise us from the dead? When I said yes to Jesus, the death, the spiritual death that I was in, evaporated. And then that happened for you too. We are no longer dead men and dead women walking. We are alive in him, because of him, through him. I don't know what kind of evangelist for the power of Jesus this little girl was, but I can't help but imagine that, well, first of all, I think she would have been asked often about, wait, didn't you, what's going on? And then she could tell her story. My story of coming alive is not as dramatic as hers. Yours probably isn't either. But we have a story. And when God grants us the opportunity to tell it, we ought to tell it. Well, see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie.